Nothing. That is odd. Is this thing working? Is this thing working? Oh, it's working now. Huh. I think it's working. Okay. Seems to be working. Just give me a second. I'm trying to set this thing up. Not as easy as you would think, but I'll get it fixed. Alright, so this is another fishing video. Not that I'm going to fish you, but fishing in the sense that, teaches one how to fish. Let's start from, first, disclaimer. Whatever I say is just random shit, okay? And as you can tell from my exploding hair that hasn't been cut for another, a whole year almost. Last time I had a haircut was July last year. I'm clearly not a trustworthy person, and I know very little, and I'm basically, not suit wearing all that. So, it's just me rambling about shit. Anyways, one thing that will be interesting to know now is how long is Italy going to remain under a lockdown, or how long US is going to be remain under lockdown. Right, so those are all very interesting things to consider. And how would one go about, figuring that out or coming up with a forecast? There's a book called Super Forecasting by, I think, Philip Tetlock or something. Philip. Damn it. Super Forecasting. Yes, Philip Tetlock. This guy. Very good book. Learned a lot from it, and I'm not saying that what I'm doing now is exactly from the book. Oh, hi, Senor Puente. But I think it gives me a lot of inspiration, let's say, on how to go about this. So Italy started lockdown on the 5th on its northern cities, and started like a whole country lockdown on the 8th. And it's been 12 days since they locked down the entire country, trying to get people to not leave their homes and whatnot. And one hasn't seen any changes yet. If you look at the numbers, we see a slight, as you can see from here, a slight slowdown on the logarithmic scale. The doubling from, here was something like, not a doubling, a 10x, 29th to the 9th, which is 9 days. Because I'm stupid. I meant, yes, 9 days. About 9 days and a half. And it's clearly taking more than 9 days now to go a 10x. So we are seeing an effect. But that effect is not nearly as drastic enough, right? So when does this thing stop? Well, one way is to look at history, see what has happened before. Italy has has 60 million people ish. Italy, I think 55 population. 60 million. And very luckily, Hubei has 56.5 in 2015. But if we just look at the newest thing, 59 million. by the end of 2018. So let's say 60 million, but close enough. What we could do is to figure out how long Hubei had to remain under lockdown. So then how do we determine that? Then we try to find some websites to get us that data. And well, we could just go to first let's go to Wuhan, and we can tell that it's still locked down, right? Started from the 23rd, and now it's still locked down. So that's not boding well. It's been 2 months, so you're looking at 2 months at least. But then if you look at the other part of Hubei, for example Huanggang, which is some smaller Hubei city, and you can see that the lockdown has been lifted on about the 10th. And if you look at some other cities in Hubei, maybe Xiaogan, that will give you on the 14th. So from about 23rd to the 14th, you're looking at a month and 20 days for Hubei, in that province, right? The earliest is about a month 20 days. Does that mean that we're going to have that in Italy? Well, unfortunately, I would say no. And why that? Let me have my beer first. So two things that plays in the favor of the Chinese, and there's one thing that plays in favor of the Italians. First of all, there is a lot of support from other Chinese provinces to Hubei. They sent in things from food to masks, basically personal protective equipment, to doctors, nurses, even funeral staff, because a bunch of people die. As you can check out the Italian videos. There was just caskets lining the floor of a church. So you do need extra people to handle that. So that's in China, the Hubei's favor, right? And then the Chinese lockdowns are a lot more strict, more drastic. As you can see, it basically just flatlined in Wuhan. That was, in terms of traveling activities, just flatlined. And for anyone that leaves their home, it's mandatory to wear a mask. If not, they will send a drone and catch you and shout at you and even arrest you. You can find all these videos online. That's basic. I'm not making this up. They send drones and to patrol the entire area and say if you leave your house, and even if you're in, basically if you're outside a roof, they will see you and then say, oh, why are you not wearing a mask, blah blah blah. Anyways, and then the compliance is very high. So these are all in the Chinese favor. The thing that's in Italy's favor is that at least there's been a month and a half of frantic research on what to use to treat the sick. We already have at least 3 or 4 probably effective treatments. There's ritonavir, there's remdesivir, and there's this hydrochlorophyll. Damn it, I forgot the name. I think that? This? No, I'm stupid. Damn it. It's the thing that they use to treat malaria. And I had a disconnection. And now we're back. Anyways, that and then the plasma treatment or whatever shit they have, right? So that's in Italy's favor, but everything else is in the Chinese favor, and the Chinese is taking more than a month and 20 days to recover. I think it's reasonable to expect the Italians to recover, to be lifted from the lockdown in maybe 3 months. That's my prediction. Not sure if that's going to be uh, the actual fact. Obviously, nobody knows the future. And what else was there? The curve. I was trying to find the curve. The curve. Here. The Hubei numbers. I know nobody wants to trust those numbers, and I don't trust those numbers. But if they're collected under the same method, then at least it's comparable, right? So how fast do things slow down? This is the cumulative. This is the cumulative curve. Unfortunately, it's not logarithmic, which is kind of messed up. But we can try. So 23rd is when things got locked down. By that time, they only had 550 cases. Maybe it's underestimated. It's probably is underestimated, maybe by a factor of 10, but doesn't matter. It's the growth that matters. And what we know for a fact is that Wuhan is sufficiently under control that Xi Jinping felt safe enough to go in there. And also, they have been tearing down the temporary hospitals, and there's talks about them setting up another one on the suburbs, but they had like more than 10 of them that can have like 1,000 patients each, and now they're putting one up to replace the 10. Now there's a reduction. There's a reduction, and so that growth went something like, by day. Let's just count the days. That's probably a good way. By the way, I don't recurse this video, so you're just hearing all my streams of consciousness, and that's probably shitty for most people. Anyways, so 10 days after that would be February 2nd. So on the 10th day, they would have 11,000, and then this seems like a slowdown to me, but there's something that looks fairly fucked here. That's the day when they change the way they collect. They collect. Well, not collect. They change the standard of diagnosis, and if you just look at here, it's probably an easier way of the newly confirmed cases. This seems to be a turning point. So what's that? That's what, when they locked it down is on the 23rd, and then if you put 10 days on that, that will be here, and then 12 days later, they had a slowdown of cases until they changed the way they count things. So maybe it will be 12 days until they lock things down, and then you see a slowing. But how much this data is worth, I don't know. Italy is Italy, and Hubei is Hubei. So, but in the end, it took them 2 months for Wuhan, at least 2 months now, for Wuhan to be back to life. All right. And US started this lockdown, but the lockdown is completely kind of pointless. You got these kids that were supposed to stay at home, not going to school, but then they had parties. It's kind of stupid, but that's what they do. And then the Italians. Oh, by the way, why are the Italians dying so much? They have some just insane death numbers. 4,000. It's insane numbers, and you shouldn't be comparing this number to this number. You should be comparing this number to the closed cases. 4,000 out of 9,100 of closed cases. This is an insane number. This is ridiculously high. That's like almost half of them die. Now, it's not gonna happen in other countries. One of the reason is that the on average the people that actually died have like an had like an average age of like 80. So as we know, the older people die more easily. You know, if a younger guy catches a pneumonia, they might recover, and if you're 80, you probably die. So yeah, that's just unfortunate. But it's not going to be the same case for every other country. Okay, so U.S. has quarantine, or not even quarantine, lockdowns that is not really a lockdown. So I would expect it to last a bit longer. Also, in terms of percentage of population infected, Italy did that when they had something like I think they did it over here, 7,335. 75 divided by 60 million, so 60 million. So you're looking at something like whatever number that is, 000. That's 10,000. One out of, so 1.2 out of 10,000. That's when they did the lockdown. And then we can look at US. US did the lockdown, I think 2 days ago or something like that. And 2 days ago would make us something like here. It doesn't matter too much. Let's say 9,000. So 9,000 divided by 300. US has what? 300,000? 300 million? 330. 330 million. So we did that a bit earlier. We had 5 zeros. Italians had 4 zeros. Right? So yeah, so that means everything started earlier, but then again, US wasn't testing very aggressively, so we don't know if that number's underestimated or not. But it bodes well. It probably means things will get better slightly faster than the Italians. But again, you're looking at months instead of weeks. Right? People shouldn't have their hopes up. Oh, after 2 weeks, by the middle of well, the initial one was like by the until the 2nd of April or something, like somebody, I forgot if it was Italy or US. They said by the 2nd of April the schools will be open. No, this thing is gonna last month instead of weeks. All right, so that is how at least I think about the length of the lockdowns, and then that brings me to the second thing that I want to talk about. But before we do that, let me address any comments. You need to say, I'm not an investor advisor. Everything I say is my own opinion. If you invest based on it, it's your responsibility. That's too formal. It doesn't. It makes me uncomfortable. Economic necessity will stop lockdown. We will trade public health for economic health at some point. We will not have vaccine for a long time. I agree. We will not have vaccine for a long time. The vaccine, although I recently read that the vaccine for this one is probably going to be easier than some of the other ones, because you can skip one step. I'm not too well versed. I studied a little bit of what the fuck was it called? Bioinformatics for my last year in college. So I know roughly how the cells do their shit. In the end, essentially, this virus replicates directly through mRNAs instead of going through another step of producing proteins and then replicating. So it's the way that we develop and test the vaccines is quicker. So maybe we're not looking at years, but like a single year, or potentially even like half a year. But yeah. Blah 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 blah. How the inflation thing is very complex. I will talk about that later. Is U.S. going to become Argentina? No, and there's a reason for that. U.S. is not going to become Argentina. Chinese government has a stronger bureaucracy, yes, and then they have a higher tendency to use guns on you, so that too. It's not a technocracy. It's not. It's just not. All right. Second topic of today. I think that's the last bit of my beer. Is how do you know if data, like, how do you know if you can trust data? And what information you can infer from that data if you know you can't trust the data? So as I said before, you cannot trust the Chinese numbers. Like this says in what is this? In China there was like 67,000, and then here it says 80,000, whatever, right? Doesn't really matter what it is. It's fake. We know it's fake. The reason it's fake is it's kind of Chinese. It's just the case. Numbers will be fake, and it's kind of because everybody try to fool their superiors to make them look better, and then you kind of only kiss up, and you don't never have to kiss down. And this thing, it's not healthy. But I'm not making a judgment at the moment. It's just like you have to understand. Don't trust the Chinese numbers, but you still have to come up with some value of the Chinese data. So what can you infer from it? Now, there's one thing that is universal. So, and then that's incentives, right? So if everybody's kissing up, what is the incentive of the one on top? The incentive of the one on top is to sustain the Chinese Communist Party's reign. So, I mean, on the same time, they also don't want the political opponents to bring them down, right? To power. Basically, power is what they are after in the end. And from power, you can have all kinds of things. And they also want to be written down in history books and all that. But we all want that to some extent. It's so first understand what they want. Incentives, Charlie Munger says, incentives. Right? Incentives means that they want to stay in power, and then you can look at their actions. So the action says they are willing to lock down basically the entire freaking country. The whole country was locked down. It doesn't matter if you're in the hinterlands, if you're in not to mention Hubei, with that thing is still, as I showed you, it was under the entire province of 60 million people was under lockdown until recently, very recently, really. And what they're also risking? They're risking. So for the rest, there really isn't a single province that was spared from the lockdown. So people say, oh, they put the entire U.S. population under lockdown. No, they put 4 times the U.S. population under lockdown, and that's very drastic. And when you do that, there's a tendency to cause resentment. People first don't want to be told to stay home. Secondly, they want to make some money. and if you are ordered to stay home, you're not making any money. Well, unless you're the equivalent of a YouTuber. And then there's all kind of disruption that would happen that would have long-term consequences. Right? So they're willing to risk all that, and also negative publicity internationally, which now the Xi Jinping is very, very sensitive about. They risk all that. What for? To sustain their reign, which means that they see this virus this outbreak as a much greater risk than everything else combined. And that's all you need to know. That's all you need to know about the danger of this virus. Did I pick that up? No, I did not. By that time, I did not pick that up. But the way I was thinking was, it was simply just exponential functions. That's the way I thought. But then, this couple of days I've been thinking like, what I could have done better then to react and to forecast what's to come in different parts of the world. I think I've gotten a little better at it. I was able to predict the complete the lockdown of Europe and US. I knew these were coming from quite a while ago, and then I was able to predict how people will react. First they would have denial, and then but then like it comes with training. So that's very important. So incentives, find out what people's incentives are, is very important. But what does that again, also keep in mind, like, ask the question, why is JYK sharing his thoughts? What are his incentives? Right? That's very important to for you to even reason about whether whatever I say is trustworthy or valuable, because I am currently short a lot of markets. Maybe I'm here to spread fear. So keep that in mind. Be skeptical of everything. So that's that. I should provide a counterexample, right? So most Chinese data, almost all of them, is fake. And then under that situation, and then when it's fake, they're trying to make themselves look better. And there's some information that I found, which is the unemployment rate. 6.2, 5.3. January 5.3. February 6.2. Doesn't matter if this thing is fake. All we need to know is it going up? Is it going down? Because that's where the signal lies, right? It's the delta. And I found blah 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 here. This is the unemployment rate in China. You could argue it's all fake, but at least they have to collect them in some way. So it was for 10 years. Let's see if I can make it largest. Oh yeah. So it was as high as 4.3. That tells you a lot. We are at 5 here, 6, which is like here, right? So, and what is that? Well, first of all, is that trustworthy? Well, if there are incentives to make the numbers look better to justify their reign, and that basically means, well, if anything, they were underestimating things. So it could be as bad as 6% of unemployment. And second thing is, well, this is coming everywhere. States whose unemployment benefit thing has been, in very short order, that's gonna double. So that's coming to all the countries. Okay, so what else? Oh yeah, on one more thing about these incentive stuff. So there is this thing. If you want to, download WeChat and follow him, it's up to you. He has his own agendas to push, but the guy is a economist for a real estate developer in China, and then here comes the incentive part. He has basically, from my understanding, two needs. One is he has to make his employer money. Right, so he has to help his employer navigate the macroeconomics. Secondly, he wants to establish credibility. He wants to make good predictions of the future so that he, as a person, and his opinions are valued more by everybody because now he has a track record of, years. Right? So those are two things he wants. Well, that means that he wants as good numbers as possible because he's not here to he's not hired by the state, and you can't tell from just this article, but from his past articles, I was able to get a sense of what this guy wants. He publishes books on essentially just, but his books is pretty watered down because he just repeats himself all the time, but he wants to establish credibility. So he has these books making predictions of the future, and some of the predictions are not even. He's not even trumpeting his own employer. He says something like, "Oh well, we don't have much room for urbanization in China, and then our population, the demographics is not conducive to further real estate appreciation." And all these are not what his employer wants to hear, right? So he has some other agendas here, and clearly in China, that's not what the government wants to hear either. So he's saying that for other reasons. I think that's the credibility part. He wants his own personal brand, and in here, he's saying that yeah, this is an interesting part. He says the official number says other than Hubei, which is still under lockdown, was when he wrote this article, the ratio of I don't know how to translate this. Fuck. The reopening of factories, the resumption rate is more than 90%, and more than 80% of people have returned to their previous posts. And for the small and medium enterprises, the resumption rate is more than is about 60%. And then the resumption rate is only the percentage of enterprises that have resumed their production activities, not the percentage of resumed production itself. So if there are 100 companies that was stopped, 60 of them, the small medium enterprises, 60 of them have reopened, but doesn't mean that the capacity has returned. The production capacity returned by 60%. So maybe they're all producing at 60% themselves, and then you're at 36%, right? For that. So he says that, but then he says something like, "Oh well, that's not very." Well, he says something like that, but then he looks at the coal consumption. Coal consumption is 76% of previous, which is something that could potentially be manipulated, because those were looking at coal consumption by the six power generating groups, and these are typically state owned, and yeah, so that number is a bit iffy. And this number, the passenger count, which I showed you before, is still 60% down. And then he said, well, these numbers are not trustworthy, so we'll look at something else. So he found China Unicorn and Unicom, and then said, well, it looks like 81% of the labor has returned to their previous city where they work. But only 32% of them went back to the place of work. So your phone is tracking you in China, which you kind of should expect. So yeah, so that looks like a much more likely number. But again, he's discounting working at home. But if you're if you're employed by manufacturing, then what the hell are you doing at home anyways? And most of China is still manufacturing. I think it was like 40% or so, probably even more. So yeah, so we're looking at maybe if we say 20% of the population can work from home, which is a vast overestimate, we're looking at 60% that actually has returned to their posts. And you can look at this, and basically he talks about things that you know, things were not all the way back to where they were. We're looking at the range between 30 to 80%, somewhere in there. But what my main point is that you can't trust this guy, at least his number, maybe not his conclusions, but his numbers, because he will find the best number available to him to show you, because that's what he wants. He wants credibility, and that's why incentives is very important. What else I was gonna say? Oh yeah, that's my shipment. My freaking shipment to China. 7th of February. It's stuck in San Francisco, and this is Express International. It's supposed to be here in 5 days. It's been 2 months. A month and a half, and a bit more. Anyways, there's one more thing I want to talk about, and before I do that, let me look at comments. Blah 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 blah. What is the purpose of the spread is inevitable once lockdown is lifted? Well, they never thought that the spread was. They didn't think about the spread is inevitable. Secondly, if you lock things down, people don't die because they can't get their broken leg treated. That's just like if you have your entire hospital filled with people that have lung damage and all your doctors burned out and tired to fuck, then you have a car accident, you have develop cancer, you have a heart attack. Who's gonna treat you? They're gonna die, even if they don't catch the virus. Blah blah blah. Personally, I think we're gonna see a year of not going to clubs. Oh yeah, I see that too. And then the fear is we know, like, by the September 11th incident caused air traffic to reduce. Air traffic did not return for almost 2 years, and that's only for 3 planes. Right, only 3 planes crashed, and this time we already have what? I mean, they're not as catastrophic, but a bunch of cruise ships that had clusters of infected. Professional investors are pumping up the market with buying opportunity slogans. It's hard to see how any knowledgeable person doesn't seem we have a much further drop. What's their incentive? Their incentive is that they're conditioned. I know a few friends that work in investment, like in the investing industry, and it's been 10 years. They've never seen there are entire generations of them that have never seen stock have a prolonged drop. What happened since 2009? Well, it's 2000, March of 2009 was the bottom of everything. Since then, it's been 10 years plus a bit. Well, it went up all the way. Well, let's just find the graph. It went up until 2010, and there was a worry of double dip recession, and then dropped a bit. But then, oh fuck. Right, here's it. Yeah, there was a worry, there was a double dip recession worry, and then it dropped by like less than 20%. It kept going, and in 2016 there was the oil shock. Oil went crazy, but that quickly recovered within a year. Right, the drop was wasn't even 20%, and then by the end of 2018, the since October, I think there was a drop of close to 20%, but then that quickly recovered within what, 3 months. So all they know is buy the dip, and the dips were never more than 20%. They have just been conditioned, and a lot of times, for example, there's a friend told me something about damn it, what, Visa. It's a company that I want to buy. He bought in already, and then that kept on dropping. He said, well, Visa should trade at 30 times. Yeah, 30 times if you look at the past 5 years, but Visa has traded much more cheaply. I look at damn it. I just wanna, here we go. Visa has traded at 20, and then before 2000 it was at 15 in terms of PE. It's only been like 30 plus around here. So he said, well, Visa should trade at 30. Well, yeah, it's they've been conditioned. It's that's all they know how to do. And same thing happens with inflation. People have been conditioned to not expect inflation. When was the last time we had major inflation? We had inflation that ended in 82. Well, that was what? They probably all died. The people that had experience with that era have mostly died. So, all retired. So, yeah. What's your background, job, company? I am a software engineer by training and education. And company, I used to work in Medallia. A company where I was one of the early employees, and I sold all my shares. This one, it IPO'd at 40. Now it's at 21. And funny thing, 21 was the IPO price, and then the first day ended at 40. My prediction, and so that's something I'm pretty proud of. Before the company went public, a bunch of friends asked me, all right, should we buy the shares or not? Well, they were able to buy it at 5. And then I just did a conservative discounted cash flows. All right, this thing is worth at least 18. And then a year later, which by the time the company has grew a bit more, well, it IPO at 21. So I was pretty much spot on, I think. I was pretty proud of that. Need to go. Stay awesome and safe. Good to see you. Bye, Señor Puente. Anyways, last thing I wanna talk about is some funny things that happens in China. So 1st of February, that's a week into the lockdown in Wuhan. Hubei, the province of Hubei, this is the Bureau of Food? How do you translate it? Anyways, Bureau of Food says we have more than 1 year of food in stock. All right. and that's the first. And then by the 6th, we have more than enough food for half a year. And then by the 15th, well, guess what? 3,000 tons of rice arrived from Heilongjiang, which is another province in China, has arrived in aid to Xiaogan, which is a city in Wuhan. Right. So, what does that tell you? How much food there is in Wuhan or Hubei? Not much, if you ask me. Otherwise, why would you have to send in all that? All that 3,000 tons of rice from the northeast of the north end of China to the center of China. Huh? Doesn't make any sense. And this is that's CCTV, which is the China Central Television, and this is their technological development, hey? Flash, hey? So yeah, that's pretty ridiculous. I've been wondering whether China would develop a food shortage because this triggered it. So what we import food. We say that we have a bunch of stockpiled food, which probably is not there. Otherwise, how do you explain this? And there's no reason to believe this is limited to Hubei, because Hubei is actually one of the major producers of food. And then last year we had a bunch of locusts in Horn of Africa that fucked up everybody all the way from Horn of Africa towards India and Pakistan. Whether that's gonna end up in China, I think it's unlikely. But that they fucked up the harvest in there, and what we know is in Kenya, the second generation of these locusts are already swarming. So we're gonna have a pretty much a lot of reduced harvest in a large portion of the world. And what else? U.S. is the major exporter of food in the world. The U.S. is going to have issues with either harvest or transportation or the planting of their food because of the lockdowns. And we know that's going to have an effect because in China, I talked to these DD drivers, right? So they're like the Uber drivers in China. He told me that there's been some disruptions on the planting of the seeds, so that's probably going to happen in U.S. probably. So U.S. is going to have a bit of a problem, and to the South America is another major producer of food, especially soybeans and stuff. Well, they have dengue fever, well, one of the fevers. And now this virus as well. So I'm assuming there will be disruption going on there as well. Maybe there's food prices going to rise in China. And if food prices rises in China, then people can't be too happy. And I don't know what's going to happen. Well, that's going to tie, at least one thing you can deduce, that's going to tie the monetary policy's hands. You don't pump more money when your people are having issue buying cheap food. It's one thing if you can't afford another fancy another fancy air conditioner or whatever, or TV. It's another thing if you have trouble putting food on the table. So that's that. I think that's all I have for today in terms of what I plan to say. Any more comments? Once that's gone, I'll go to bed. Are you a mobile developer? No, I'm a backend developer. But I have to write mobile apps now because I don't write. I just review their code. I used to follow Draft 4. I don't know if you were familiar with those folks very much. I don't know who Stratfor is. Yeah, I don't know what Stratfor is, so can't answer that. Yeah, so that's all my thoughts for today. Hopefully it's useful. Maybe it's not. Anyway, I'm sure you guys will let me know. And if you want to buy the book, I'll put a link there, and it'll be an affiliated link, and you will send me probably more than 5 cents when you buy it on Amazon. All right. Goodbye.